I'm going to go ahead and get started though, because you're here and your time is valuable. And I know there's other sessions that y'all want to get into as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if somebody joins us, we'll just keep going and answer any questions that they may have. Okay. So let me tell her. So avoiding an electronic news disaster, and what this really entails for you, and what I want you to kind of know is that basically that involves electronic news involves anything with radio, television, or social media. All of that is viewed as electronic news. And so when you start looking for a college, if you're looking for a major of some sort, just make sure that you look at their news media and their majors so that you can basically have an idea of what you're going to cover in there. She's asking me if I'm in my session. I was. Now I'm not seeing y'all. Now I am. They're apparently trying to change some things. Okay, I'm fine. I'm just going to keep going. Apparently some other people are having trouble with their sessions. So sorry about that. Okay, so y'all talked about anchoring and reporting and those kind of things. And so essentially, what you want to make sure is that you understand everybody's position. Everybody in a newsroom definitely has a role to play in news gathering. You cannot do electronic news without a partner. And so the reporters, as some of you know already, those are the people who gather and report the news. They do all the fact checking, the interviews, going out and getting the content. And I know at a lot of your schools, people rotate. And so a lot of people, even professionals, start in very small markets to learn everything. There's soft features and hard news. I know at a school, you don't always have a lot of hard news, but anything that you can cover right now, if that's something that you're wanting to continue to do, reporting is something everybody should try and do. And then videography is the other key role. You know, those kind of people in the field, just learning how to shoot basics for your video and interviews will help you avoid a disaster in the field. If you know how to report and get facts and shoot video and shoot good quality, having great eyes and great angles, you can make or break a story because you've got to have the video for this medium. Even radio stations now are also using video to help tell stories. And they work very closely with reporters and editors and their technical team. All these people have to be working together. You mentioned about your producer that I met just a moment ago. You know, that person, while they're in charge of the newscast and the rundown for 30 minutes of a show or 15 minutes, I'm not sure how long yours is, they have to choose which stories appear in the newscast, but they're also got to go, they use their mental skills as far as being a manager, a psychologist, and a multitasker. So really, you kind of have to think about that as well. And so the producer also looks through a lot of resources that they have to have as far as trying to make sure that they've got a whole team that is bringing everything together. Did we lose the screen on sharing? Nope, there it is. They're messing with the technical stuff, so I'm trying to make sure I don't mess you up. And then the anchors. So if everybody behind the scenes has worked together very well, it gives the anchors a lot of confidence in being the face of your station. I know many of you see a lot of different people in the news, and the reason that they're so confident in their presence on air is because behind the scenes, it's not a disaster. Everybody has done their job and they look very professional, polished, and experienced. So really think about that and making sure that the people who are part of your station representation for your school, that they feel really good before they go on the air. And then you've got in a weather department, I'm not sure if within your newscast if you do that, but really, you know, they don't use scripts in real life. You know, it's kind of impromptu and follow along with graphics. And so they really only get in trouble when they're wrong. So they've got 2 to 3 minutes in a newscast, but then sometimes weather like here in Alabama is so wild. We were just talking about 2 days ago, a lot of us around here were in shorts, and now I'm freezing this morning. So that's definitely a key department. So trying to make sure that these different things that you're wanting to show your audience about your school and about what's going on in your community is important. You got to have sports. I mean, sports at a high school is huge to cover. And so that's a big responsibility too, as a reporter and a videographer, to get the best video and to earn people's confidence so that they will do the interviews with you and continue to let you come and interview them and do some of the best stories that will really help you down the road. The other thing you've really got to think about is who's deciding all these different stories. This is a position that a lot of schools don't necessarily have. The assignment editor may actually be your teacher, or it may actually end up being someone who's a little more experienced to kind of who decides what news stories go into your newscast and what you cover. So definitely that's an emergency position. If something happens, who makes the call on what story to cover? And so planning for that emergency is really big. News directors, that's who does the hiring and firing in a newsroom. And I'm sure that is your teacher at this point in time. The main leader in the newsroom always. It answers to the general manager in a real station, and I'm sure your teacher answers to the principal and a school board. And then there's those production positions that you mentioned to me that some of you are already doing, operating the any kind of equipment to make the newscast run. Those positions have to be filled and have a certain responsibility, or you're going to have a news disaster. If you don't have all of these different positions in operation for audio, directing, camera, graphics, and teleprompter, you may have already learned that it can really be a disaster. And then the other disaster that can happen in the field is if you don't kind of understand what your rights are and what the First Amendment says. We have the freedom of speech for a reason, and there's things within the freedom of speech that maybe you don't know. And so I have this in here too. Let me see if I can pick from the current slide. This is just a good website. I'm not going to spend the whole time going through it, but I'd like for you just to be able to see. Let me stop sharing here and share again to go back to that. This website about free speech is one that I use in an introductory class when I teach it, just talking about what freedom of speech is and what freedom of speech is not. And it can be very, very confusing for a lot of people. So I want to make sure you kind of understand that. And that's just a good resource for you to understand as a budding journalism student. All right, let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. These are some of the newsroom terms that I'm sure that you're learning or maybe have already done. But jargon, newsroom jargon is a really big thing. We talked to a producer for one of my classes this week, and that's my background. And these terms, VO, VOSOTs, a package, stand up, tease, and live, are ones that you will not only hear in your high school, but those will continue if you go on into a college program for news media, or if you go on to work in this field. So if you already understand those are really good things to help you avoid an emergency, because you have to be able to communicate and make sure that you all understand what each other is doing. So understanding what those are is a really good thing. And they all have a certain function in the newscast. And then depending on what newsroom you're in and in the field, it may have a few different terms as well. Teases are a really big deal because you see, you want people to know what's coming up in your newscast, whether you have a morning newscast, something during the midday at your school, or if you record it all, put it together and airs at night. So through the day, you could have some teases that you record and put on social media, or that you put out through your TV system, through your high school, if you have one. And so knowing how to write those and how to do them good and tight in 10 seconds or less and look very professional will also help you avoid an emergency where nobody's watching. And it's just a good promotional tool for you. Also, another thing to help you avoid emergencies is just not getting nervous on camera and knowing what you're talking about. Your nerves can get really tight if you're on the set to anchor, or you're even more so sometimes than if you're in the field. And you got to think about how you just look on camera, how your speech is. Are you very conversational? Are you having eye contact with the camera? And your face? Wearing masks, it's really hard right now for a lot of people to connect with you. And for me too, with my students, but I have to look at their eyes. And then if we're not wearing masks, if we're on Zoom, I can really see if they're engaged. And that's the same thing that an audience needs to see from you. Dress attire needs to be, very conservative, like solid colors, jewelry, not very flashy, and makeup's really important too. And then another thing that you have to kind of think about is reporters have to have, a certain amount of personality and authenticity to them. We had guests this past week, 3 of them, and that word authentic kept coming up multiple times. I want to know that that person is authentic and credible. So it's a lot to ask for sometimes to make sure that you're doing all that. News director pet peeves, just something to kind of think about to avoid an emergency. And I know you got a lot of competitions and things like that. There's live shots. They don't want to really see a lot of entertainment stories, like where you're like doing the red carpet and features. They do like to see that you can actually do a solid base story. And if you're wanting to go into reporting, or you're doing that for your high school station, try to make sure that you have some consistent looks, not multiple types of hairstyles and stuff like that. And then avoid writing in cliches. Writing is the hardest thing for broadcast. My students still really struggle with that all the time. And so trying to figure out how to do that. Some other keywords that news reporters want to see is, and field reporters, is just something professional, having energy, being real comfortable. Those are just some real keywords there that they want to make sure that they see in you. I don't know if any of you have seen this or not, but if you've taken a newspaper class, you hear a lot about inverted pyramid and how you have to have so much information up at the top. Well, and the most important information to hook an audience. Well, it's kind of the same way in broadcast, but if you're looking at doing like a package, I try to teach my students how to think in 10 seconds, because an audience for broadcast, you have to get their attention quick, and then it has to keep moving with the reporter's voiceover and how they wrote the story, and then sound bites. And if you can see here on the example on the right side, you have 10 seconds of voiceover, 10-second soundbite, 10-second voiceover, soundbite, and then a reporter stand up in the middle, and then voiceover, soundbite, voiceover, reporter. So you really have to kind of think about, to avoid an emergency of someone not watching you or not continuing to watch, you have to give them some pacing and some energy, and that's created in broadcast with time. You also have to think about your package angles. As some of you are probably learning a little bit about, each of your stories aren't very long, and they all should have a clear focus. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about package angles, and not using the words I and me in the story. You should not have an opinion, and get used to that. If you want to go into this field in some form, try to write your story about who you're focused on, and that will help guide you a lot. In the package yesterday, I had a reporter from Fox 6 in my class, and she was telling and explaining to the students that for every story she does, and especially when she really started learning to make sure she didn't have an emergency where she got in trouble by reporting in the field, she would literally write out in every story who, what, when, where, why, how. And then she would fill in the blanks to that, and that would help her really write her story. And she would just do that as a little formula to help her make sure that she covered all the bases. So that may be something that would also help you. And then think about this, and you may already be doing packages, but think about those 4 essential elements for a package. You have to have natural sound of what's going on. Like, it would be horrible to have a story about a basketball game or a football game and not have the sounds of the crowd or the helmets hitting or the squeaking of the shoes on the court. So you have to have natural sound. The reporter's voice has to be present. You have to have the video of the game that's going on, or if your story's about a student that's done something really interesting in the classroom that's done really well, you have to have video of them. So you have to have matching video of the story, and you need plenty of it to cover up your voiceover. And then for most stories, you always have to have at least 2 sound bites or 2 interviews to help make it very interesting and balanced. And then those stand-ups, while they're not necessary, because some schools, and even here too, a lot of people are doing a lot of live introductions and live tags by the reporter. But to try to teach students how to bridge between stories, we teach them how to do stand-up bridges. And that also, if you go ahead and shoot one of those out in the field and you get into a bind, then you still have something of you on camera that you can use to actually do your stand-up bridge. So it's just very important to think about those essential things when you get assigned to go do a story. You definitely have to have those 4 elements in it, and make sure that you get enough information and enough video to cover all of that. Just something to avoid an emergency too that I think is really hard for students is just knowing how to research and understand a story, that who, what, where, and why. Just take a little bit of time to do some Googling, is what I always tell my students to do before you pick a topic. Make sure it's something you're interested in. And even if you're not interested in, go research it. And, you can prepare a mock script and kind of know what's going to happen before you go out in the field. But when you go out in the field and shoot it, you really learn and confirm what you're going to say. And if you're going to be on camera, sometimes you just have to really chug through it. If you mess up, you're learning. And so, but with a little bit of experience, that on camera and live reporting will come into play much more. And so working on your nonverbal communication with your hands and your eyes, all of that helps you avoid an emergency in the field and get caught on camera. So learning how to practice being on camera and doing live reporting in a mirror or in front of your family is always what I would advise before you actually go on camera. I used to do it all the time. A lot of you know about our famous head coach, Nick Saban, who has the process. And I try to teach my students that most stories that you're going to do has 16 steps to it. I'll be glad to email these to you. I won't take the time to go over every one of them, but it kind of boils down to there's 16 steps to producing a good story in a minute 30 package. And it's a little bit of research, it's pre-planning, execution when you're actually shooting the story, and then post-production when you're editing the story, and then going back through and making sure you review all those steps and look and see if you missed anything before it would actually go on air. So those 5 key steps are broken out a little bit more in Dr. Clark's process. I also have some package script templates I would be glad to share with any of you. My email is chandra.clark@ua.edu, and you can find me very easily online. But these templates really kind of help my students and could help you in just kind of getting a pacing for how to write. I do some definite descriptions to try to help them avoid an emergency, because when they go out into the field and they're having to learn, I want them to already know all these different jargon words and then the formats and formulas that will help them, and they'll know what kind of jargon they've got to know. There's some different package examples here. And I know I don't have time to share them with you, but if you want to take a picture of this, there are definitely, and I can send this presentation to you and your professor or teacher. I'll be glad to. But the ones up top are really some good resources that you can use. TV News Storytellers has a YouTube page where you can see some very good examples of stories, and it's also a community where they have a Facebook page. And then Boyd Hubert, he is one of the best broadcasters who teaches writing all over the country. He's done a great job. I've been in numerous workshops of his, and he has a YouTube channel called Land of 10,000 Stories, and it is some great motivation that you could look at to learn a lot from. And then I've got several pieces on here from friends in the industry that they've given me, and Joe Little and Bryant Somerville, very creative men, male reporters, and these links to their work will just amaze you. One of the pieces I had on here, Bryant did a Lego stand up where he created Lego pieces to animate everything in his key points. So, um, and then the other reporters here are former students who are now professionals, and these were their first reels. And I thought if we had some time, or depending on how this went, I could show you a couple of them. But I'll be glad to send them to you because they are good motivators. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit. So on the package evaluations, what someone's going to be looking at for you if they're judging your work. And some of you may be applying for scholarships for college. And so some of the things that people start looking for if you submit some videos or anything for a scholarship application is they're going to be looking at your writing style, your video, how did you shoot it good enough to illustrate your angle, sound bites, how was your voice, did you have facts in it, and then did you have natural sound. So those first elements that I talked to you about, that's also how they're going to evaluate your work. We do a media camp here in the summer at Alabama. And then I talk with a lot of high school recruits. And when they come in, sometimes they tell me about this YouTube channel they've got and these videos. And I talk to them about that. And I try to talk them into starting a portfolio from high school and getting all their videos into one place and maybe starting their own website so that they can keep up with their work. And it is very impressive to send that out as a college application and you have that already done. And I've judged things like that, and it's just very, very impressive. So those are the 5 things to really look at: that writing, your video, the sound bites you did, your voiceover, and natural sound. And I just want to leave you too with, how reporters communicate. It's very different. Radio reporters, they talk into a microphone and there's no audience, but a TV reporter has to look straight into the camera and have that in their head that they're actually talking to an audience. And so making sure you've got that basic equipment before you go out the door. I know we're going to run out of time, but some of the ones further down on this list people forget about. Having a video camera and tripod, yeah, you've got that. But that microphone, if you don't have good sound, is going to cause you a lot of problems depending on what kind of equipment you have. And then how are you going to store that? Making sure that you have the SD cards that go in the camera or however your camera operates. You've got to keep up